today is radical worship. This is radical worship. So watch this. When Abraham worshiped, there are 4 things that I just want to share with you. I'm going to just say to you, these 4 things are the 4 most critical, fundamental considerations of worship. Because it's back here in the beginning. These are issues that were related to worship, the way God intended it. Are you ready for this? This is Abraham, and I'm just looking at verse 8. So here they are. What did Abraham do when he worshiped? Number 1, he stopped. Any questions? As I was studying this passage, folks, it just hit me. I began to ask the Lord, say, Lord, please show me something about worship. And God said, well, just open your eyes. Listen to what I'm trying to tell you. What did Abraham do when he worshiped? Number 1, he stopped. Can I say this? Everybody look at me. That is your and my biggest problem with worship. We are not prepared to stop and worship God. I'll guarantee you there's at least one person right now, you haven't stopped for 1 second. See, folks, we are a busy people. Abraham was busy. Just consider this. He had several businesses. He was a multi-millionaire, by the way. By the way, he had cattle, he had herds. Have you ever been around a dairy farmer? When I worked on farms in Africa with sheep and cattle and so on, folks, we used to get up at 2:45 a.m. to start the engines to milk the dairy herd. Every day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This man was a farmer. He had camels, goats, sheep, cattle, he had everything. He was a businessman. He had the biggest family you and I could possibly imagine. This man, not only did he have a family and a business, but he was a traveler. God had sent him on his way. He had accepted God's marching orders, and we've just read about it. This man was on the move. I mean, he had his caravan. And back in those days, you can't imagine what it must have been like to pack up. I just smiled like crazy when my son, who was here last week with 3 of my grandsons, had to go back to New Orleans. It's like this massive undertaking just to get them all loaded up into one motor car and begin this epic journey across the frontier all the way back to New Orleans. Just getting babies up, getting them ready, getting everything in place. You know what it's like. Can you imagine what Abraham had to go through? Can you imagine, folks, he was going from one place to the next because God told him where to go, and he had to pack up his tents. He had to do all the stuff. He had to move his entire household and all his herds. But when it came to worship, he stopped. My biggest challenge. I'm telling you, even coming into church this morning was a battle for me to get into the sanctuary. I've just somehow deep in my heart, moms and dads, I want you parents to look at me. You've got to lead your children. You've got to teach them how to stop. When you stop, you will encounter the Lord's presence. If you don't stop, you're not. All week we talk to God as we go. We worship the Lord everywhere. But God set aside a period of time. Abraham stopped. Number 2, he gathered. Here's your second thing. He gathered. This man brought all his family together. We read about it repeatedly, right throughout the Genesis account. He just didn't stop. This wasn't something he just did for himself. He gathered. He gathered his family. You know, one of the questions I get as a pastor, if you'll beg my pardon, I'm telling you, I get this question. Should I insist that my children stop and gather together in worship? So everybody look at me. Yes. As long as your children are under your roof, you need to make them stop, and you need to gather them in worship. Because, folks, we're living in a world today where I'm telling you, the demand, you just take in sport. Folks, high schools today and primary schools, elementary schools, they no longer doing their little band practice and their athletic gathering. They're doing it on Sunday mornings. Have you noticed how many colleges and universities now schedule their graduation ceremonies on Sunday mornings? Have you noticed that? If you and I don't stop and gather, what chance do our children have? And then our children grow up and they've never been taught any different, so what reason would they have to do that for your grandchildren? He stopped. He gathered. Here's the third one. He built. He built. That's what the Bible says here. He pitched his tent and he built an altar. By the way, as I began to study this, I began to ask myself, say to myself, Lord, what are you trying to tell me here? Worship involves building. It's constructing. It's putting it up. It's making the place. It's putting the pegs in the ground. It's raising the roof. It's organizing. It's strategizing. Worship is not just a haphazard thrown together, whatever happens, happens. God somehow back in the beginning is trying to tell us something.